any opening statement, and then we can go to questions, or just want to go to questions?
Sure, we just thought this would be efficient to get everybody together. We've had a lot of media requests. Obviously, this has been an unprecedented week in college sports, and concerned about everybody's health and well-being, but our primary responsibility is these student athletes, and we're going to make sure that we're doing the very best things for their safety and their health, and working through a lot of decisions the last few days, and I imagine we'll continue that moving forward. So open up to any questions.
Danny, what's the last 24 hours been like for you, and what's it involved, I guess, being in communication with, I'm sure, conference officials and maybe some other people from the NCAA?
It's been a whirlwind, been drinking from a fire hose a little bit, but still kind of getting over the shock, and I'm not sure I have, of the cancellation of NCAA championships. I certainly would have hoped we would have postponed, and who knows what the result of that would be. I don't know, as nobody does, what this virus is going to do in the coming weeks and months, but from my probably myopic vantage point, working in college sports and knowing how hard these kids work their entire lives for those opportunities, I think it's been really hard for all of our staff, and especially our coaches that work so closely with the student athletes, but most importantly, really hard for the student athletes to see that opportunity go away. I mean, they work unbelievably hard for those opportunities. So, but there's smarter people than me that are looking at that, the health professionals, and I know that everybody that's in a decision-making role is making decisions to the very best of their abilities.
Danny, can you just kind of talk about how fast things were flying, particularly on Wednesday night? I know much of us were at the UCF Miami baseball game, and we see the NBA saying they're suspending the season, and all of a sudden a player has coronavirus, and next fans aren't coming to the conference tournament. Now they're canceled. Just kind of talk about how crazy it was Wednesday going into Thursday.
Yeah, it's like one decision after another and one event after another. Obviously, with the NBA player, I knew where things were going at the Miami game. It was a great crowd. It was awesome to see that in the new ballpark, and our baseball team and all of our spring sports are just on fire. It's another reason this is so frustrating. But yeah, it was getting back from the baseball game and then seeing what happened with the NBA, and starting to wonder at that point, all right, where does this stop? And didn't realize that the next day would go like it did, but obviously the NCAA and when the conferences started canceling the tournaments, and I remember I got the text about our own conference and that conversation was happening, and I was like, hold on a second, that came out of nowhere. And then at that point in time, I didn't realize that so many other conferences were having that conversation as well. But it is a good example, I think, of we compete against each other all year long as conferences, as universities, and I think if there's a positive over the last few days, college athletics have really come together, and people have made decisions and collaborated, I think, pretty well.
Danny, I know that the decision came from the NCAA, but have you and your fellow AAC athletic directors talked a little bit about the idea of canceling spring championships altogether? I mean, maybe trying to come up with some other ideas, or was that just once the NCAA kind of came down with it, you have to kind of follow suit?
That's the most complicated thing we're trying to figure out right now. And what are those teams focused on? Athletes are driven. They need something. They're in the off season. They're working on the next season, and they need something they need a goal. And so, is it about getting an extra year of eligibility, which I strongly believe all the winter sport kids that lost their championships should get an extra year of eligibility, and obviously the spring sport student athletes as well. Or is it about seeing what happens here in the next few weeks and seeing if there's a way to salvage the spring season? And we have been slow to make decisions, and we'll continue to do that. Not looking to win a trophy for being the first one to make a decision. Obviously, we're going to operate in the safety zone and not do anything that endangers our student athletes or fans. But we're going to continue to kind of make decisions in phases. So the decisions we made this morning were for the next 2 weeks, which is in lockstep with what our university did, asking the student body to study remotely for the next 2 weeks, not return to campus if they don't have to. And we're going to continue to evaluate it. I don't know where we're going to be 2-3 weeks from now with this virus, and if things are in a much better situation, then and there's a path forward to salvage some semblance of a spring season, then we'd be open to that. But we're learning as we go here. Things are evolving hourly.
School was supposed to start up next week. You know, we know that UCF's telling people, your students not to come back. So what's the status of spring sports at the present time? Are they just kind of in the same mode as the regular students? Are they going to assemble and practice in the near term, or what's kind of going on with, say, baseball, tennis, softball, those sports?
So for our spring sports, we're dealing with it a little bit on a case-by-case basis, wanting to hear from those student athletes where their minds are. If they have hope that we can compete later in the spring, then we're allowing them to practice. It's all volunteer, no student athlete. There's no such thing as mandatory right now. If they want to be here, I think that they're probably the safest here with all the resources we have. So our training room, our weight room is open for voluntary workouts. The spring sports are allowed to practice for the time being, again on a voluntary basis. I've asked those coaches just to kind of be connected to their athletes and make decisions that are in their best interest, and we want to make sure we're listening to them right now.
Do you have any information on any staff, faculties, players, athletes who may have been in a situation where they might be isolating right now because they have symptoms that are similar to this? Is there any information about anybody within the sports department?
I have not heard anything to that effect here at UCF, no.
Danny, I mean, it's a little bit, I'm sure probably down the road, but what sort of financial impact do you think this will have on a program or a school like yourselves going through something like that, seeing these sports being eliminated?
We don't know. We're trying to figure it out. The conference tournament being canceled, there's financial implications, both revenue and expense there. Still don't know how it's going to play out with the NCAA tournament. Don't know what their insurance situation looks like and all that. There's potential, I mean, if we're not playing games and jumping on planes and traveling all over the country with our spring sports, there's an obvious savings there. But we have season ticket holders that have bought baseball games, we have single game tickets that have already been purchased. So it's fluid. We're probably not going to get a handle on that here for a week or two.
Dan, you may not have an answer to this. I know driving over here, apparently the NCAA put out some sort of release in the last 30, 45 minutes about the potential of players in spring sports receiving, seniors receiving maybe another year of eligibility. Do you know anything about that, and would you be in support of something like that?
Yeah, I know that conversation is going on. I think they're trying to figure it out. I'm strongly supportive of that, knowing how hard these kids work from the time they're 5, 6 years old to get that 4 years of experience. It's an unbelievable investment of time and capital with their families. It's an all-in thing to be an athlete at this level. So I think that the seniors and everybody on the roster should get an added year of eligibility, which is going to create some complications with the scholarship caps. We're going to have to figure out some flexibility there to make it work. And I don't think we should stop at the spring sports. Just because the winter sports got to play the whole regular season, you can't snatch away that championship opportunity. I think about seniors, especially on our women's basketball team. I think had earned a second consecutive at-large bid, and I think that should they choose to come back and play, if they want to do that, I'm going to strongly support that.
Danny, have you heard from any parents or anyone who's reached out to you maybe with concerns over what the school is doing and everything when it comes to the coronavirus?
I haven't heard directly from parents. I know our coaches and staff work more closely with our student athletes and families. We've kind of been through the ringer here for the last few years with the hurricanes, and maybe a positive byproduct of that is we've earned some credibility with our student athletes and their families. We're going to do right by these kids at all times, and I think that they know that, and we'll do everything we can to put them in the very best position.
Danny, you kind of touched on this a moment ago, but can you elaborate more on specifically women's basketball, and did you have any conversations maybe with a KK Wright and a senior that obviously would have had to have been crushed when the news came out? Did you get any feedback from Coach Abe about how that news hit that team in particular?
I have. I talked to Katie earlier today. I think every single one of these teams, was absolutely crushed. I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to talk to KK specifically about that. I'm sure that's a conversation probably for further down the road. Yeah, I'll support to the extent I can get an added year of eligibility for not just spring sports, but winter sports. I think it's really important.
Danny, my apologies if you've addressed this already, but what is the level of guidance you've received from the NCAA to this point on how to proceed?
Their staff's been really interactive with Cameron Walker, who's our Senior Associate AD for NCAA compliance. I know they've had conversations today about the additional eligibility component, which is complicated. Some flexibility in terms of, we have so many rules, so we have competitive balance relative to in season, out of season, and we find ourselves in this weird place where sports that are supposed to be in season, we don't really know what that looks like. So I've been very happy to see the amount of flexibility from the NCAA staff and the amount of interaction they're having with us. And obviously there's over 350 Division I schools and Division II and Division III, so I'm sure they're working really hard, and we're all dealing with an unprecedented situation.
Danny, you're in a unique position where you have several members of your family are also in athletics. Your dad and your brother and your sister. Have you had a chance to talk with them and kind of maybe see what's going on elsewhere across the country when it comes to this?
Obviously, my brother's probably, I know he's disappointed. Was expecting a bid with his team in the NCAA tournament, and my brother Brian at FAU is dealing with the same set of circumstances we're dealing with. And my dad was the chair of the committee. He didn't get it. He got off the hook. He didn't have anybody. They didn't have to sit in the front of the firing squad justifying their seatings, but everybody feels the same way. I think anybody that does what we do, our immediate thought goes to these student athletes and how hard that is to lose that opportunity. And there's nothing we can do right now, but we're going to do our best to try to support them.
I mean, I feel like this answer is going to be pretty obvious, but the spring game, I'm sure, for football has been postponed until further notice, correct?
We haven't made that announcement yet. We just hadn't got to it yet. Yeah, we won't. We'll definitely be looking at postponing that, and we don't know yet what spring football is going to look like. We already started, had a few practices before our spring break, so I know that there's another conversation with the NCAA about the concept of flexibility with the normal constraints of when you can have spring practice, and if that needs to go later, then it needs to go later. But everybody's going to wait and see what this virus does here over the next couple of weeks.
Anything else? One more?
Yeah, I know this press conference wasn't about your contract extension that was announced the other day, but just can you briefly kind of speak about your dedication to being here for the long term with that announcement?
Yeah, I think I get way too much credit. Our student athletes, our coaches, what they're accomplishing on the field and the court, on the track and the boats, it's amazing. And I think that we have a lot of work to do if we're going to sustain the success that we're having. But we are very serious about building a perennial top 25 athletics department here. I've been consistent with that since the day I got here. I couldn't be more excited than I am about what we can get accomplished here. But it's going to take a lot more work. And what I like about that announcement is for our donors, for our fans, everybody that's contributing to lifting this athletics department up, I want them to see that we are a legit powerhouse in college athletics, and we're going to be a national player. And I'd be crazy for thinking about going anywhere. And we're just really lucky to be here.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.